The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericavariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Welcome to Strategies for Financial Survival with Michael Figueroa. When financial adversity hits, and it very well may hit you, it's those that educate themselves and use their skills that will survive, no matter what field you're in. Now, here's your host, Michael Figueroa.
Good morning, everyone. In this episode, I want to talk a bit about how to analyze your current financial situation, how to assess your skills and resources, your ability to educate yourself, and how to have business mentors to help you out. We're also going to discuss character types that are typical situations in startups. So what I'm looking to do today is to give you a little bit of my background and give you some ideas as to what you're going to look at, how to utilize your skills, and then if you email in some questions, we can answer that. A little bit of my background on how this show came into effect was I do a lot of counseling for people who have been through situations when they have lost their job or they're moving on to other situations because their business has failed, problems have occurred, and like me, they've been faced with a situation of lawsuits, credit card claims, loss of their home or foreclosure on their home. And I've been through a lot of this stuff, and so I'm looking at how to share this with a lot of people and how to get through this situation when it happens. And there are a lot of different ways people analyze it and how they deal with it, and I'll share with you how I dealt with it, and maybe give you some ideas how you can deal with some of these situations. I have with me today my associate Coy Vernon, who is going to be talking with me about some of the situations we are going to discuss. And so one of the areas I want to talk about is a bit about my mortgage banking company. I'm skipping over areas that deal with going through college and how I started out in business. But one of the areas that I've learned in being able to survive is how to analyze the direction and what you're doing when you're working through any type of financial problem. So let me go to a little bit of this. Back in 1980, I had started a mortgage banking company, and from 80 to 86, times were good. Everything was doing well. It's almost similar to the time that we had from the year 2000 to 2006, almost the same parallel. And in that situation, we had a tax reform act that went into effect in 2006 that impacted the real estate market in 2007, 8, and thereafter. And in that regard, my mortgage banking company went effectively into bankruptcy, and I had to figure out how to survive after all the years I put in to make that company work. A good 8 years plus a good time beforehand, and everything I had disappeared almost overnight, literally overnight. So I had to deal with litigation, with a loss of all my income, with my home in foreclosure, and with parents that were ill, and I was taking care of them. So with all that stress and pressure, God only knows how I went through it, but somehow it came through all that. And again, going through that type of survival, you look back and you say, how did you get through that, and what items in your life prepared you for being able to survive that type of attack? The only thing, luckily, I didn't have was a diagnosis of, I'm sorry, but you have terminal cancer. So thank God I didn't have that, but I had to deal with how to survive being thrown out of the airplane per se. So let's see where we go from here.
Well, I want to go back and cover some more details. With Centuris, I want to talk about the litigation. I know it wasn't. You said your lawyers were trying to kind of feed you to the lions there. I'd like to go into that some more detail, just so people can really understand what it is when your business fails, what you go through. It's not. It's how dramatic that can be. So if you could sort of talk about that a little bit more in detail.
So, of course, when the business looks like it's going under, and your bills are greater than your income, and all of a sudden you are, as I mentioned, told that you have terminal cancer, which wasn't literally the case, but it was financially the case. After you go into your shock mode, then you have to locate an attorney to be able to guide you through the, quote, bankruptcy. And in that, of course, I found that everyone has a solution that they can save you from anything that's out there until after you pay your bill. And then you have to deal with knowing the fact that no one really cares about you as much as you do. There's no advisor, no friend, no one that really, really cares about your situation as much as you do. And what I found was that I had to take care of my own affairs. And that meant that I had to become my own attorney. And in that regard, I had to learn the necessary law and how to navigate through all the problems. Now, luckily for me, I have a law background, so I had some basis to be able to go through this type of situation. But one of the first things I had to do was review all the law that dealt with the potential problems that I was going to face, and then research all of that and understand what that all means. The other thing that I learned how to do was get rid of the mystery of what that means. When somebody says they've been sued, I know from my experience when I deal with customers, clients, and they tell me I've been sued and they present me with the lawsuit, there's this fear, almost as if they're going to prison and they're going to be shot the next morning. And so what I learned to do was I went to court to look and observe as to other people who were going through similar claims and sit in on their hearings. And I learned a great deal about that from sitting in their hearings, what the process is all about. And that process is a lot less scarier than what you anticipate. Maybe if you watch TV, which I really don't, but if you do and you see what court is like, it's not really like that. It's a lot more boring, you might say, than what you see on TV. So being able to grasp and understand how to analyze your situation was really critical. And going back a little bit for Coy's question was, how did you get to be able to deal with this and understand this? And again, it was being able to observe other people going through the same situation and through that, become familiar with it so that you understand how to move forward with it, and then take charge of your affairs in your life. Because you can't, again, I stress this over and over, you can't count on anybody to take care of your affairs as much as you can. Does that answer a bit of what you're asking, or do you want to get into more detail, Coy?
Yeah, no, that answers what I'm asking. So from there, you've got all this litigation going on, and then so once you make it through the litigation, or actually probably as you're going through the foreclosures, you've got to start immediately assessing what your income's disappearing, and it's disappearing. So you've got very limited choices. You can either go get a job, sit there and hide and try to hide from your problems, or you've got to, what you seem to have done is said, I have skills A, B, C, D. This can do this. I can do this. I know this person. What did you do? How did you start developing a new source of income to survive financially, as you've seen, your mortgage bank was going down?
Well, as you go through any of these situations, when I'm advising people going through foreclosure, let's say, once you get through the shock of what is happening and you start to get your wits together, then you start to look at, well, what skills do I have to be able to survive and be able to obtain an income? And for me, my background was buying and renovating and selling fix-up houses. So I went back into that business where I would go and look for foreclosures, usually empty homes owned by banks that would be at trustee sale. And I maintained a good relationship with my investor pool from my mortgage banking company. And through that was able to buy the properties through them, renovate them and resell them. And that's how I process through my new job, per se. And I want to go back to the fact that what was really good was in the beginning when I started my mortgage company, and before that when I was in school, I established a good reputation with my friends and investor pool so that they stuck with me and understood that although the economy caused the collapse due to the Tax Reform Act, or I should say the Tax Reform Act caused the collapse, my investor group was loyal to me, and so when time came that I needed them back to help me do the buying and selling, they were there for me on that. So that worked out very well. And so going back and doing these foreclosures and selling, fixing up the properties brought me in contact with other people. And of course, I, at the time, I was a real estate agent, became a broker in 1979, and so was doing brokerage on the side. And we're talking now about, the collapse occurred in January of '88. We're talking about somewhere around 1992, at which time I met a person who I took under my wing as a trainee, and we recently more or less celebrated our 20th year in business together. He'll be on our show one of these days, one of these episodes. And with him, training him, I had him out there doing hunting for the proper properties while I structured the transaction and raised the money. And we had a great partnership that went on for a number of years. But that's generally how I started out after the collapse and after I got my wits together on what to do.
Okay. So if you were to advise, I'm a young guy starting out sort of almost as your trainee associate. If you were to advise me, if I came to you and said, Mike, I'm in this situation, how would you start that advisement process? How would you look at my situation, and what would be the first things you would look for? I'm talking everything from character traits, skills, possible people to team up with in business. How would you assess and start training? Almost like you mentioned, you trained your business partner. How did you start that training process to get them get them going?
Well, the first thing is, being in any business, there usually are people that, and I had these, everybody figures that you can collect a check really easy by being able to do, how would I say, I can teach you real easy. You can then go out and make a lot of money very easy. And this is what never happens. What I'm looking for really are people that are committed, they're dedicated, they are very persistent in being able to make something happen with their life. And being someone that is involved with the Navy SEAL organization, those are people that I really, really love, because what they do is they give their full commitment to anything that they're in, and they make it happen. They don't ever give up. And that's what you have to do in order to survive this type of thing. And or when I'm looking for somebody, I want somebody that's absolutely committed to be able to move forward on the training program. And nothing is easy. You don't just immediately put the matrix thing on your head and all of a sudden you're an expert in the field. It takes many years of training in order to do that. Like anything else that you do, whether it's sports or any type of business, you have to put in the necessary time to be able to be trained and understand how to do it.
All right. So, we're closing on a break here, but I wanted to kind of prep for when we come back to the break. I'd like to go through and just give some real examples of, when you started training people and how long it took them to get it off the ground, so we can kind of paint a picture of just how hard it is to get a business off the ground. It doesn't, you don't just file your articles of organization and type your operating agreement and sign it, and then the next thing you know, you have business coming in. This takes years, and it takes sitting through some probably pretty dire financial situations. So I'd like to be able to talk about, some of the people that you've trained and give some examples of things that they've gone through and how hard it is to get going, so that people know that you've got to have a lot of grit, I guess you could say. You never, like the SEALs, you never, ever quit. So, are there any, so we can prep before break, are there any people that you have in mind that you'd want to talk about before we go to break?
Well, one of the people that I'll probably talk about will be Jeff, my business associate that I mentioned. I'll give you a little bit about his background and history as an example. So I gather we'll have our break and be back and talk about Jeff and how he started out, and see if you have any questions you want answered.
Alrighty, and then real quick before we go to break, I want to take a second to direct people. If you would like to get a hold of Michael Figueroa, go to the website www.intuitivestartup.com. Click on the tab that says Contact and just fill out the form, and then we can answer any questions that you'd like.
The Internet's #1 talk station. #1 talk station. VoiceAmerica.com. At Intuitive Strategies, LLC, we provide services to our clients that help them develop a strong education in business. And we also help them to develop a strategy that will allow them to turn their skills into a profit, protect their business and personal assets, and plan for a successful retirement. Our consulting and structuring services include business analysis, budget analysis, management analysis, ability to raise capital from investors, tax planning to minimize tax liability under code, as well as legal structure to protect business from frivolous lawsuits. Resolution Capital Strategies also provides document preparation services such as business structuring documents, documents that establish an entity, management agreements, retirement plans, estate planning, wills, and trusts. Let Resolution Capital Strategies help you with your business. Visit intuitivestartup.com or call us in Tucson at 520-425-8759. Visit intuitivestartup.com today.
Stimulating talk.
It gets those synapses in the brain firing really fast.
All the time. The #1 Internet talk station where your opinion counts. VoiceAmerica.com.
You are listening to Strategies for Financial Survival with your host, Michael Figueroa. If you have a question or comment about the program, please send us an email to support@intuitivestartup.com. That's support@intuitivestartup.com. Now, back to Strategies for Financial Survival.
Welcome back, everyone. Let me follow up with my last point that Coy had asked was, how do I evaluate someone that is looking to change their life or go through to be trained by me, if that was the case? So let me give you an example. Most of the people that come to me, I meet either through real estate meetings or seminars, classes at the university or classes at real estate school. And what I'm looking for, as I mentioned earlier, is how committed is the person going to be? So in this case, my associate Jeff, he was doing life insurance at the time, married, didn't have any children yet. He was 24. But he wanted to move into another field. And so my typical thing was to give a test and say, I'd like to see, if you want to really be trained, call me and we'll get together and I'll show you what has to be done. Now, the first thing is at least half the people that are interested in this situation don't ever call. The other half calls, and then we get together. Usually I give assignments, and the assignments I try to give are for clearing out who's really going to stick with it and who's not. So you get another half of the half that falls off. The next thing I want to look for is I want to look for someone that is motivated and why they're motivated. And when you're looking at what to do, what I found is you have to have a passion for what you want to get into. If you're going to go into some type of business because it makes good money, that's not going to be fun. I guess I can tell you that I've been fired from every job I held. I think there were 12. I'm not sure, but I was when I took jobs that I did not like, I did not do them well, and I'm not very good at being somebody that is the whipping boy for somebody that's my boss. So I was summarily dismissed from those jobs, which forced me to figure out how to farm for myself or die in the forest there. So looking at that, I'm looking again at that type of feeling that the person has that they are going to really put in the effort. And then I start giving them assignments and I take them with me to understand how to evaluate properties. Again, this is because this is what I do. And during that time, I want to understand what their ethics are. If they're in it for a quick dollar, not interested. If they're into it for how to get money by taking advantage of situations with people, not interested. Those are not going to work. What I found is in my business, if you take care of your customers, they take care of you. So I am extremely protective of the people that I deal with, and they understand that and appreciate that. So we're looking at what the ethical background is of the trainee, and again going back to the idea of what do you really love, what do you really like, what type of training do you have, and if your training is such that you don't like what you've got your degree in or your trade that you understand, then how do you move it from there into something that you really like? And my parents were factory workers. My father was a steel worker. My mother worked in clothing manufacturing. I was not supposed to go to college, but my aunt told me that you can do anything you want if you set your mind to it. So I figured I'm not staying in this little small town in Pennsylvania. I'm getting out of here, and I'm hopefully going to see the world. So I taught myself how to read and write Chinese, and got to, by luck, a long story, the University of Arizona, and learned that I actually could make something happen that was different than what seemed to be my destiny path. And my destiny path was not to go work as my father wanted in the steel mills in Pennsylvania. That was just not my passion. And going to the University of Arizona to study Chinese was nice, but it wasn't going to get me any a job that I really would enjoy, other than I could order Chinese food. So then I decided to get into business and law, and luckily my roommate's father was a real estate broker who taught me about buying and selling fix-up houses. So not knowing anything about buying and selling fix-up houses, I just learned on the job by actually doing that. And I put together a little seminar in my dorm that talked about how we can go and buy and sell fix-up houses. And through that, I raised $5,500 from a bunch of dorm guys, $500 here, $300 there, $250 here, and you know you're an expert in any field when you have never done it before. So I became an expert, and we all went out to find a fix-up property. We found one. We bought it for $19,000. We then had the guys come from the dorm and clean and fix it up, and sold it for $36,000. And how did that happen? I have no idea. I think it was by pure luck, and ergo the career started and things moved on. But that brings it back to making sure you understand that you've got to get into something that you're passionate about, you really like, and you'll do really well. And the money comes after. If you do it well, you'll make your money. If you, again, I stress, if you're interested in the money first and you don't like the work, you're not going to stay long and you're going to be miserable. So I encourage you not to go that direction. So let me get back to Coy here. What other questions did you have that maybe fit into this line of thinking that you brought up?
Well, I mean, you were talking about motivation, what motivates people. Obviously, greed. I think you've probably seen people make bad decisions because they're in the business for the money. Maybe cheat people out or whatever. But what motivated you to get into this, and what really, when times were low, what motivated you to pick up and go to battle when you needed to? What was your motivation?
Well, like I mentioned, I was at the university studying Chinese, and it looked like that wasn't going to really make any living out of that. And luckily, I just took a shot at doing the real estate renovations. I have no construction background at all. I just kind of winged it and found that I really liked it, and so I went into that. But I'm somebody that has to know everything about the field I'm in. So I had to study and did study on my own the law regarding buying and selling of fix-up properties, foreclosures, trustee sales, and I'd go down to the courthouse and see what was happening. And then we come to, how do you raise money? And I gave you a little bit about being able to raise some money from my dorm mates, but how do you really raise money? And we're going to have a couple of series on that later on through the month on how to exactly do it. But generally, I put together packages, and I'll say that one of the most important things that I did was befriend or become friends with mentors. Mentors. My law professor, my banker, a CPA, the business broker, the real estate broker who was the father of my dorm mate. And I've done this so many times with other people where someone comes to me, a young person comes to me and says, how do you do this? And usually I find that, well, for me, I like sharing stories. And so these people shared stories with me about how they made it through life. And they were maybe 30, 40 years older than me at the time. So they had a lot of history to share with me. And they gave me books as to biographies, how to follow somebody else's trek through the desert. And history is my hobby, so I love to read about great generals and kings and people that were great tacticians in battle, and studied Sun Tzu and Machiavelli and the Caesar's Gallic Wars and Napoleon. And unfortunately, I'm not into American history, but my associate Jeff was. He is. And those were inspirational. And that inspiration helped me to follow a pathway. It's almost like following the footsteps. And with the mentors that I put around me, every time I needed help on where does this road lead, I was able to get somebody to say, oh yeah, this road, it goes down this way and then you turn here, watch for that pothole there, there's a big branch sticking out there, and there's an alligator that's kind of guards that bend, and if you catch him when he's sleeping, you can get past him, but if you don't, you're going to get your leg bit, so be careful about that. And so I was guided through that, but I always like to tell people when I meet with them, make believe you don't know what fire is. And I'm trying to describe fire. And finally I get frustrated and I take your hand and I put it into a flame, and you pull it back and you say, wow. And I say, now you understand what fire is. It's a concept that you can't necessarily explain, but you have to actually experience. So in business, you have to actually experience certain events in order to understand something. It's difficult to explain it, but that's what when I train people, I try to put them in the battlefields per se. They're doing the transaction. They're actually writing the contract. They're doing whatever they have to do. It's not where you're being shown everything. You actually are being guided, and you have to actually do the item. So that's kind of my training technique. So that's how I try to teach and train, and that's how I got into what I'm doing today. Coy, what else did you point out?
Well, I'm sitting here listening, and it seems like the common trait from everyone from yourself and the other, Jeff, the other guys that you talked about, is a willingness to do everything, to work extremely hard. I know there's times where I've had to work, and the guy that I work with, Will, and even my father, you're working 20 hours a day, and you just got to do the willingness to do whatever it takes to get your business off the ground, because failure, is obviously not an option. So and you, I remember listening to you, and you were talking about when you first started getting the flips and all that, you were doing some of the renovation work yourself. I mean, even if you didn't know exactly how to do it, weren't you jumping in there with a hammer and tearing down the walls, right?
Yeah, I did that. The funny thing is, when you don't know what you don't know, then you go ahead and do it because you don't know you don't know. So, yeah, I figured, renovating houses, that wouldn't be hard. So I got an investor to put up the money, and back then those prices were $15,000, $20,000 that are now $125,000, $115,000. But I'd get the university students in there. At the time, I was paying them $5 an hour, and I got to tell you a little story about how there's a thing that developed there that you'll enjoy. And I'd be there painting and cleaning, fixing things. The things that I didn't do that I had to hire out was plumbing, electrical, heating and cooling, maybe roof work. But landscape, painting, fix up, all of that stuff we could take care of ourselves. But I'll tell you a little story about what happened when we were doing the renovation. I hired these 2 college kids, and we were doing by the hour, and what we started to do was to arrange for bidding. And I would say, okay, guys, this room, to paint and clean and put it in order, this ought to be about 3 hours, and that's $15. So let's see if we can do that within that timeline. And what they developed was, they said to me, you know what, here's what we can do, Mike. We will bid the house out totally. We'll figure out how many hours it takes, and we'll give you a price, and you buy the material, or we would buy the material, and if we bid a price of, let's say, $500, if it goes under, we made money. If it goes over, we lose money, but it's not your problem. It's ours. And so I looked at that. I said, that's a really good idea. That way I have a lock-in. I don't have to deal with the hourly issue, and it would work out really well. So I see we're coming up to another break soon, and I'm gonna tell you how these guys started a construction company, and we're building office buildings in the millions of dollars from this little situation that occurred. So until we break here, I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So now I had locked down prices that I knew my cost would be to renovate the house. And with that, then I knew what I could sell it for, and I could then budget, and I would know what my profit would be. Well, it looks like we're going to go to break right now, and I will come back and tell you the rest of the story.
The Internet's #1 talk station. #1 talk station. VoiceAmerica.com.
At Intuitive Strategies, LLC, we provide services to our clients that help them develop a strong education in business, and we also help them to develop a strategy that will allow them to turn their skills into a profit, protect their business and personal assets, and plan for a successful retirement. Our consulting and structuring services include business analysis, budget analysis, management analysis, ability to raise capital from investors, tax planning to minimize tax liability under code, as well as legal structure to protect business from frivolous lawsuits. Resolution Capital Strategies also provides document preparation services such as business structuring documents, documents that establish an entity, management agreements, retirement plans, estate planning, wills, and trusts. Let Resolution Capital Strategies help you with your business. Visit intuitivestartup.com or call us in Tucson at 520-425-8759. Visit intuitivestartup.com today.
Streaming live. The leader in Internet talk radio. VoiceAmerica.com.
You are listening to Strategies for Financial Survival with your host, Michael Figueroa. If you have a question or comment about the program, please send us an email to support@intuitivestartup.com. That's support@intuitivestartup.com. Now, back to Strategies for Financial Survival.
Welcome back again, everyone. So I left you off with the idea, and this is a really good point here. Remember, I'm talking about these two college kids that I'm showing how to paint and clean up houses. And they get this idea that we ought to form a partnership, these two guys say. We'll form a company, and we'll bid these houses out to Mike, and we'll hopefully bring in, and this is what they did. They brought in other college students that were part of their fraternity, and so they would bid a house out. Let's say they bid the house out for $500. Back in those days, today that might be $10,000. And let me go to the $10,000 range. So let's say they bid out $10,000 for everything: paint, putty, broken glass, all the stuff that was necessary other than heating, cooling, plumbing, electrical, etc. And then they would hire in a bunch of their dorm or fraternity guys at maybe $6 an hour because they were bidding out at $10. And so their cost may be $7,000 that they paid out. I paid them $10. They made a $3,000 profit, and that wound up maybe to be like $25 an hour for their time. And so I loved it again because I had a fixed price. I didn't have to worry about overruns. They were independent contractors. I did not have to take taxes out and do all that. I actually structured them so that they were, and back in those days, it was a corporation. So they were a corporation, and I showed them how to do everything they had to do. And as I rolled along buying houses, because my investor group would grow, because my investors would make back then, their yield was between 14 and 16% on their money in the early 80s and going into 84, 85, 86. And so these guys developed this business well enough that there were times that I would find lots that could be bought that were fully improved lots. And they would connect up with my architect friend and design a house and actually manage and build a house. So what would happen is the one guy got his contractor's license, and he was about 23 at the time now, and he's building these houses, maybe 1,100 to 1,300 square foot houses, 3-bedroom, bath and a half. They'd sell for about $35,000, maybe $40,000, and so I would fund this transaction. They would build a house, and we would split the profits. It came to the point that the guys would find the lots, want to build a house, and I'd put up the mortgage money for them at 12% and 2 or 3% as a commission for that, and they would build these houses. And by 1985, they were able to bid my office building for me, which was a 12,000 square foot building, and $1 million, I think it was about $1.5 million project. Concurrently with that, they're bidding other office buildings out. So I'm looking at this and saying, this is interesting, from doing fix-up houses from the dorm into a contractor doing, I think this guy did about $5 million a year volume by 1986. And he was making a good $150,000 profit. And he probably was about at that time 27, 28 years old, and it was interesting how that developed. So, I go back again to how does this happen? And he got a passion for it, but he had gotten his degree in electrical engineering. So go figure, electrical engineering. He did not want to work for anybody, did his own thing, and he had a staff of about 15 people under him. In fact, he had hired the architect, the project manager, the estimator, all these different people inside of his operation. And I gave him at that time about $1.5 million credit line, and he was off and running, doing his thing. Of course, in 1988, 89, when the market crashed, he went broke and lost everything, and it was very difficult for him to get through the emotional problems. It took a while. He left town and started life somewhere else. But again, not until, as a good friend of mine told me, who successfully used to buy and sell public companies, not until you've gone bankrupt at least once do you become a successful businessman. And at the time, I had no idea what that meant. But having done that a couple of times, where my business started and crashed, I can understand the concept of going broke at least once. It's if you take a chance, you're going to get burned by the fire, but the next time around, you know when it's coming, so it's part of that education. So let me go back again to Coy here and see if I've touched on almost everything that you thought I should talk about in this first session.
I think there's a few other things that you just mentioned. Everybody gets burned, and I think that's a lot of people. They get an idea to start a business, but then they're stuck as the eroding bronze, as I was once told by a mutual friend of ours. You're stuck in frozen in perpetual motion, but you never do anything because you're afraid of what will happen. When you leave the comfort zone of I have this 9-to-5 job, I get paid this per hour and this an hour, and they're afraid to really risk it all to gain that. So talk about risk. Would you say that's a big characteristic of
that is that? How many of you have known friends that they hate their job? They absolutely hate their job. They would do anything to get out of it, but they need that paycheck to support their family, and they have children, and so they're trapped in the squirrel cage. And I'll tell you that you almost can visualize that if you put together a plan. I look at it this way. It's almost as if you're in the river, and the river's flowing fast, and there's a falls. You can hear the coming up, and you're going to, in time, go over and crash into the call it the Niagara Falls, the bottom of that river. And you start to slowly paddle your way to the shoreline. You can't go straight across. You can't go back. You can only ease to the shoreline little by little, and hopefully you move quickly enough that you can grab a branch and pull yourself out of the river before your inner tube goes down the falls, and you're saved. And look at that as this job. When you're younger, you have the chance to move your inner tube to the shore and plan for, how do I do my own thing? And when is the best time to do it? Because once you pass a certain age, maybe it's age 45, maybe it's 50, you're done. You may not be able to ever do it again. But when you're 30 or 28 or 35, you're in the prime for being able to move over and learn, save some money, and start to educate yourself for how to jump into the next situation that you'd like to do. So plan it in advance. Do that while you're at your existing job. Educate yourself to be able to do the transition that you always wanted to do. And then you just got to let go of the rope as you fly across that jungle, and you grab a vine that's laying there, and what's that, like Tarzan? You just take a chance, and some can do it and some can't. But I'll put it this way, if the lion is coming up the tree that you're at, and your only choice is to jump to the vine that's out there or get eaten, you might find that jumping to that vine is your only choice, and you will jump or you'll get eaten. And if you jump and you see yourself flying from one vine to the other, all of a sudden you become proficient at that, and ergo you're now in your new business, you're doing what you enjoy, and you look back and you say, how the heck did that ever happen? I can't remember how that happened. But when I look back at what I was doing and say, how am I doing this today based on what I started out with, which was learning Chinese and history, and there's no connect whatsoever between the two. I'm amazed at what you can do if you put your mind to it. And if you have just a few breaks with the right people that help you through that river and throw you a line every so often and pull you over to shore. So I'd say remember that and think about that. That may be the situation that you're looking for that may help you to come ashore and start your new life in a new land. Did that answer that question in a long about way?
Yeah. You did. One thing I want to mention is, as we're talking about risk, and the risk, you're going to get hit. It's like I used to kickbox, and you don't kickbox, you don't get good at kickboxing until you get punched a lot. So in business, I've learned that, you're going to get hit with, financial hardship. It's just like getting punched. So what do you do when you look at your bank account and you have $40 or whatever? Are you going to run back to the, to your job? What have you done in those situations?
Well, I try to figure out how to farm a lot faster, or how to get my net into the river, a bigger net with heavier weight, so I can catch more fish. But you'd be surprised how you improvise in order to survive that you never thought you could really do. It's I guess the question is, you're walking along the pathway, and all of a sudden there's a lion that's on the pathway, and it sees you and it starts chasing you. Boy, can you climb up that tree fast. That is, there's no question that you'll be able to be up on that tree, because you'll find the energy to be able to do it that you never thought you had. Sometimes you'll find that the most difficult situation that you're put in is the biggest impetus to make you change and force something to happen that would not happen if everything was nice and easy. So look at adversity maybe as an opportunity to change your life and move a different pathway. Always kind of remember that whenever there's a closed door, there may be an open window. And that's something that I remember I was taught by someone. Just keep looking around and always look for where you're supposed to be guided. And you'll find that open door or open window someplace, even though the one that you're trying to get through is closed and you can't get through it. Anyways, I think that's...
Yeah. Well, we're about to wrap up here, so I went in sort of a quick summarization of some important, I would say, characteristics on assessing thing for, people looking to start up a business or, something along those lines is, when you say never ever give up, you got to be comfortable with risk, and then when you get hit with, hard times, think about how you would react, like you say, are you gonna run faster and find the deals, or are you gonna hide in a hole? I would say you can never ever hide. And we didn't really touch on it much, but emotional hardships, how you deal with that. I think that's the ability to not be affected too much by the emotion when the hard times hit you. But we've got, we're about to close here, but Mike keeps talking about Chinese, so if you could close us out in Chinese, Mike, I think that'd be pretty cool.
If I could remember what I'm going to say. So I do know this. So 我们说再见，很好，再见。
And what does that mean?
We are wishing you goodbye and hope all is well.
Awesome.
Until the next time at the next show that we meet. And that will be on Friday.
Next week
At 10 a.m. And hopefully we'll get some calls in and some emails that we can answer and have a dialogue with people out there.
Yeah, and again, for those emails, go and check out intuitivestartup.com and go to the contact form and fill that out. Another thing we're going to be building on there is company profiles for startup businesses so that you can go on there and blog and share with the community your experiences and hopefully help each other out there. And then also you can read more about Mike and just what he does. So anything else, Mike?
I think that's about it for right now, and we'll see you for our next show.
Thank you again for tuning in to Strategies for Financial Survival. Please join host Michael Figueroa again next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Variety Channel. Until the next show, survive and succeed.
Thanks again for listening to the preceding program, brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit VoiceAmericaVariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit VoiceAmerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the preceding program are strictly those of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.